One of the great lies about the modern political space online is that it's just open and free debate. A lot of times it's just talking to people with whom you agree. I'm just going to examine here some of the discussion between Fuentes and Dave Smith from about last month, just to dispel some of the insane conspiracy theories that are being pushed forward in an effort to actually advance the discussion and counter some of the false assertions that are being made repeatedly by these two.
A relationship there. But the fact is that, say, look, the worst thing in my lifetime that Israel's done to the United States of America, as I'm not sold on the 9/11 stuff. There's some.
Dave Smith is bringing in insane conspiracy theories about Israel being involved in 9/11. He says he's not sold. There is nothing there.
Questions there, but I think it's far from as conclusive. I think people are way out over their skis saying they know for a fact Israel did 9/11, but that's a topic for another day. But was the war in Iraq? The war in Iraq is no question, and Coleman Hughes can try to argue with me about this. There's just no question that the neoconservatives and the Likud party and the whole Bush administration, this was pushed in a direction. It's not the only factor, but it is more than what made the difference. Like, the war does not.
You can go check out Coleman Hughes' debate with Dave Smith, but it was pretty thoroughly debunked that it was simply one letter amongst tens of thousands of letters which talked about a potential successive regime change. There's absolutely no evidence that this letter did anything to impact foreign policy, and there's no assertions from Israel that that happened either. So this is just straight conspiratorial thinking.
Not happen without the neocons and without Netanyahu. It just doesn't. And yet at the same time, Jewish Americans were either the best or one of the best groups on that issue. Jews opposed the war in Iraq way ahead of the general public. And like right-wing Christians were like the worst group on that. And so, but again, my target isn't them. My target isn't the people.
Right.
My target is like the people who propagandized them into believing that. And so if the thing is like, hey, I stopped short at like actually naming the Jews, it's like, well, yeah, because I don't think that's right. And I don't like, yes, they're and we can get into more.
Dave is talking about the fact that you have left-wing Jews in America that don't agree with conservative Jews in America, conservative being a political doctrine, and also don't agree with the government of Israel, which, of course, that would make sense. So there isn't really such a great discovery here. It's just that the Overton window has shifted to now Dave Smith has to be the rational voice saying that Jews are not thinking monolithically.
More of this, but like, no, like Barry the dentist has nothing to do with any of this. And he, I think on some level, maybe I'm wrong, but I also don't think you're really trying to gin up hatred toward that guy. And so maybe that's why I stopped short of blaming the Jews. I think it's sloppier and not as accurate.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I think it's important just on a basic level to say that we don't agree on everything. Like, we are distinct, and I wouldn't even say it's about further or closer. It's just that we are coming at it from different places. You believe it's the neocons, and it's in particular the war party and Israel and how those interact. And me, as an identitarian, I do look at the world through an identity-based lens, that you've got whites, blacks, Jews, and they all have political interest. They all identify as these groups. They group up based on them. And then those groups have conflicting interests. That's what politics has become, is like meeting out those interests. Like, is it in the interest of white people to go to war in Iraq? No. But for Jews, yes, because they have this connection to Israel. And same about all.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there, but the idea that whites, blacks, Hispanics, Jews all think the same is completely insane, right? Dave Smith doesn't call him on that. Dave Smith claims to be Jewish. I don't know if he is or not, but he clearly does not think the same as a loud minority of Jews, certainly the majority of Jews in Israel. I can't speak for all the liberal Jews in America, but just the construct of the argument that Fuentes is putting forward is extremely sloppy. And then the idea that 9/11 happens in America, and all of a sudden the interest isn't even to protect America, it's to protect Israel, is very sloppy.
All these other things. And so, even getting back to our beef, yeah, we could quibble about, I don't think that there's some conspiracy. I don't think they got together and said, let's invite Dave because, he's going to maintain censorship and Jewish control. I don't believe that. But I do believe that you clearly take the more moderate position, or even I would say the more liberal position. As a libertarian, you're like a lowercase l liberal in the sense that you think that it's like you said, it's not Jews in themselves or Jewish identity in itself. It is particular people in power, in particularly the state, that are doing these violent policies. Whereas me, it is maybe a more radical rejection of liberalism. And I think that, maybe you're informed by your Jewish identity, or you're just ideologically believe that it is.
Yeah, because Jewish identity, for many people, specifically in America, really has no connection to Judaism. So the actual pushback on what Nick is advancing here is actually challenging what Judaism or Jews does Dave Smith represent. He represents leftist Jews that don't know much about Torah or understand traditional Jewish thinking. So yeah, it would make sense that Dave Smith does not actually represent Jews. But Nick is kind of glossing over this and the fact that it actually undermines his entire argument. You have people on the hard left like Dave, which, for all intents and purposes, think like white secular Americans, not like Jews.
Is a more moderate position, and they platform that because that's the version they want. That's the version that is safer for a Tim Pool or whoever. That's the version that the system is maybe comfortable with. That's what they might be willing to accept. And they don't want to take it to the place of the Jews for the reason, maybe for the good reason you described. And by the way, I'll give you another concession because I want to be objective. There are people that are legitimately hating Jews right now.
Yeah, there are.
I saw in Florida, they're pulling up on Jews with like water pistols and spraying them with water. And I got on my show and I said, fuck that.
Yeah,
I said,
and I appreciate that.
So Nick Fuentes is saying if you're spraying water at Jews, then that's where he draws the line. But he's perfectly comfortable with casting aspersions on all Jewish Americans, saying that their fidelity is actually to Israel, and then also promoting the idea that as a result of that, America is not taking care of its citizens and instead spending money abroad on foreign wars and foreign involvements that only have to do with Israel, nothing to do with America or American values. It's actually counter to American values, and American people are suffering as a result. So that's where Nick draws the line, a water gun. But when it comes to actually spreading conspiracy theories, it's totally fine.
Yeah, because I don't believe in that. I'm not a piece of shit. If I saw Ben Shapiro on the street, I saw him on the street and I said, hey, man, why did you do a speech? You didn't say my name. I didn't run up and try and fight him.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in attacking.
They made it out like you did.
Yeah, right. Like I attacked his kids or something,
Yeah.
Human shields, right?
He was walking with his children and Nick started screaming at him.
He picked up his kid when he walked across the street. It's like, okay, bro. but I don't believe in picking on random people. I'm not a cruel or hateful guy. And you do see that. And that video bothered me in particular because if people start to think it's okay to do that, the ADL isn't necessarily wrong about the idea that it is slippery slope. You pull up on somebody with a water pistol. Okay, what if it's a paintball gun next time? Is that really okay? That people are going to be harassed and like shot at with a airsoft gun or a paintball gun? No, that's bullshit. And that's denying basic dignity, basic rights. That's not Christian. That's not American. And there is an excess of that. And I agree that it should be sort of contained. But I think there's a fine line between that and saying that it is a bigger issue than the neocons, because when it comes to these influential Jews, like Larry Ellison, let's say, he's not religious, but he's tight with Netanyahu. Jeffrey Epstein was tight with the left in Israel. And to the extent that you're right, Jews were the biggest critics of the Iraq war, in many cases, yeah, there's liberal Jews, but they're liberal because that's a strategy for Jews to succeed. They have these debates.
It's a strategy for those individuals to succeed as individuals, like any other individuals in America. It doesn't make sense to try to assign some sort of ulterior motive only because a person happens to be of the Jewish faith.
What is best for the Jews? And like Brett Stevens at the New York Times, he mentored Bari Weiss. He says, Trump,
God, I hate him so much.
And he sucks. He's a neocon. Case in point.
Yeah, I got in a big fight with him on Gutfeld's show years ago. He was such a smarmy prick. Anyway, whatever. But yeah, oh God, it's the worst. The worst.
Yeah, but he says in 16 or 17, he goes, Trump is bad for the Jews because he is opposing the liberal values that have been so good to us as Jews. And it's like that sort of encapsulates when, like the ADL, for example.
I don't know exactly the argument that Brett was making, but my assumption would be that he's opposing issues he perceived with democracy, rightly or wrongly, not saying that it's specifically about Jews. So you see how Fuentes is actually kind of superficially assigning things to do with Jews to issues that really don't have to do with Jews.
Gets criticized. They say, well, the ADL is making Jews look bad, or they're going after people like Shapiro and protecting people like Ilhan Omar. In other words, they're attacking Jewish Zionists, but they're not hard enough on the progressive left. And what I see there is still a distilled Jewish self-interest, which is okay because we're all people and we're all advocating for the most for ourselves. But in America, we just need to do a better job of managing that. And I think that.
So now it's okay after he just said that the Jewish people are Jews on the left or the right are advocating for Jews, but he says that this is okay. So then what's the point in even of raising this issue, even though it's not even correct in how he's analyzing it?
The Jewish community's out of control.
Yeah.
Is basically it.
Well, I would say
the Jewish community is out of control. That's a huge misconception because you're first of all assuming there is a Jewish community. Just because some of these organizations call themselves the stewards of the Jewish community does not mean they actually are the stewards of the Jewish community. I don't know too many people who actually care about what the AJC says. I know a few on the left that care about what the ADL says, but no one else. Do people on the hard left care what the Orthodox Union says? Do people who don't give to the Federation care what JFNA says? Jewish Federation North America? I don't think so. So that's the other thing where Fuentes really isn't being so honest, and I wish there'd actually be follow-up, but to date, he really hasn't had any interviews in which people are engaging further on that topic. So that's just a bit of how I see this issue here. I would like to actually debunk some of these things and have a further discussion because I think it's important to understand the arguments he's making and effectively counter them as being utterly false.